there, I'm Kim Sedgwick.
And I'm Amy Sedgwick of Red Tent Sisters
And ecosex.ca. Today's question is the IUD a good option?
Great question. So the first thing we want to do is just clarify that there are two different options when it comes to IUDs. So one is one that has hormones in it, which is typically the Mirena IUD. So it gives off low-level progesterone, or a synthetic version of progesterone, I should say, over the course of about 5 years. And then there's the copper IUD, which doesn't actually have any hormones in it. It has a different mechanism of action, which basically makes implantation impossible, and it also can disable sperm. So it also creates a bit of a mild inflammatory reaction in the uterus. So that's one of the ways that it works. So in terms of options, so we'll talk mostly about the non-hormonal, because as many of you know who watch us, we're not a big fan of the hormonal birth control. So we're going to talk a little bit about the copper IUD. So the copper IUD has some benefits in that it's a very high level of efficacy. It's like over 99% efficacy, and you don't have to insert anything before or after. Once it's in, you don't have to worry about it for 5 years. So it's a really nice, like, kind of no-brainer kind of birth control.
I want to good for people around spontaneity, because a lot of the natural birth control options, like condoms, cervical caps, those sorts of things, you have to insert right before. So I think a lot of people like the spontaneity aspect of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. There are some concerns about it. So it does increase your risk of an ectopic pregnancy. And there is some risk, it's very low, about 1 in 1,000, but there is some risk of it actually perforating or puncturing the uterus. So that's certainly a concern.
Yeah. So some other pros in terms of like cost effective. I know that's a lot of people really like the fact that, as you said, it's about 5 years. So that, it's a one-time purchase, and then you don't have to buy anything for quite some time. So I can talk briefly about my experience, because I actually got a copper IUD, I guess about a year ago now. So for me, they thought it would be a good option because at the time my periods were relatively light and my cramps were not that bad. That is a major consideration. They really don't like recommending the copper IUD for women who already have a heavy flow or have bad cramps, because it seems to really aggravate that problem. So for me, they thought it would be a good option. I was a little bit nervous about the insertion, and I do have to say the insertion was painful. I brought our mom around along so that she could hold my hand, and I definitely took pain medication, which I don't normally take. So I'd recommend also taking the day off work, because I think I had it in sort of like early afternoon, and then I went home and just hung out in bed and watched trashy television for the rest of the day. But then within 24 hours, I was totally fine and didn't feel it at all. However, on the note of feeling it, the copper IUD does have strings that dangle down. The point being that at some point when you need to remove it, that they actually have something to grab onto. So they sort of dangle down into the vagina. So what they do is they cut them so that they're not dangling too much. And usually they leave them long enough that they sort of naturally curl upwards.
Around the cervix.
Around the cervix, thank you. But in my case, they cut them too short, so then they couldn't naturally curve upwards. They did dangle down, and unfortunately in some situations my partner could feel it. So that was a bit of a problem. And then for me, as we mentioned, it does sometimes aggravate cramps, and that's certainly been the case for me. My period is heavier and lasts longer, and my cramps are worse. So some considerations to think about with the IUD. All right, so thanks so much for the great question. If you've got a question, send an email to the sisters at redtentsisters.com. You can also join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, and make sure to sign up for our newsletter so you can get lots of other goodies from the sisters.